Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Today we have two special co-hosts, Joseph Katz from CoverWrite and Mary Green from Nassau. Joseph, good to see you.
Great to see you. Predicting a great session today.
Yes, predicting. I predicted as well. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well today. I also predict that we're going to have a very interesting conversations that will go down paths that we don't expect.
Yeah. So, Mary, tell us what we will learn today and maybe introduce our guest.
Thanks, Paul. So today we have Yaacov Goldenhersh. He's the co-founder and CEO of LiST, a leading artificial intelligence platform for assessing an individual's state of health, and it also performs medical underwriting. Prior to co-founding LiST, Yaacov served in the Israeli military as an F-16 pilot and worked in the business department of the Israeli Air Force. Yaacov, tell us a bit more about yourself and what led you to creating this company.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I guess before the Air Force story, maybe I'll take it back to when I was about 10-ish, driving around with my father. I was in the shotgun seat with my map, no GPS, Waze, or anything of that sort. And I'm navigating to our destination. However, at some point, my father realizes we're off track and we're going the wrong direction. So he pulls over and he asks me where we are on the map. And I pointed at a spot. And he's like, no, we're actually over here. And then from that point on, I was able to bring us to the destination. That's a realization of understanding your exact location or current state is crucial. Fast forward about 10 years. And I was, as you mentioned, in the Israeli Air Force. I was actually an F-16 navigator. So it's even better for the story. But as a fighter jet navigator or pilot, you basically are trained. I'd say the key point to success is being able to process a lot of information and make the right decision at that point in time, what your course of action should be. Now, usually it takes weeks of prep. For example, for mission or for big training exercise or something like that, you may do weeks of prep and years of training in order to execute. But your execution is very dependent on while you're flying. You have a lot of indications and points you should be noticing and realizing, whether it's warning signs or even just your altitude, speed, direction, your team formation, your opponent's formation, and so forth. And with that, you have to make relatively precise decisions of course of action. So understanding your exact situation is super crucial. I mean, if I take it back to the navigation, today we all drive around with Waze, Israeli shout out, or Google Maps. And when we do, we all know that if we're just turning it on and we're at a traffic light, he may tell me to turn right or make a U-turn when I know I have to go straight because he doesn't know what direction I am. So just that, not even understanding where you are, even what direction you're going, in order to plan your next steps is super crucial. So we usually could ignore it, but if we don't know where we are, we'll make that U-turn and then we'll make another one and get en route, right? So that's kind of the importance of realizing where we are. Now, the founding team of LiST is actually more capital markets type of group. And we have an expertise in like reinsurance products and secondary market life insurance products. But being in that business, we came to realization where we had to really understand longevity risk and medical underwriting procedures. We realized how medical underwriting is not up to date to where it should be in 2023, especially with the capabilities out there, AKA artificial intelligence and so forth. If I want to give an example to that, or a little bit about the history of medical underwriting, or even in general underwriting, I mean, insurance goes back to, ancient days like the Babylonians and so forth, where people were going on their boats and they didn't know who would make it to the other side. Even if they made it, they didn't know if their goods and merchandise would make it. So they'd say, okay, we're 10 boats, probably 7 or 8 will make it. You guys will split the stack at the end of the day. but they didn't look into how good the boat is, when it was manufactured, what distance you're exactly going, are we going the same day, what the weather is on that day, and so forth. Fast forward, 1,000 years, or a couple of thousand years actually, and today in life insurance, it also evolved. It took time. Only like 150 years ago did they realize that gender matters, and men live shorter in average, and men smoke more in those days, and therefore they should not be paying the same premium as a woman. And only in the 70s, 1970s, early 70s, did they create cohorts of smokers and non-smokers. So until then, insurance is about cohorting groups, right? It's 10,000 people in one pool insuring each other for catastrophe, for life-changing medical events, and so forth. So it's very clear that somebody who smokes is in higher risk of life-changing medical events, whether it's health insurance or life insurance, and they are not in the same cohort of a non-smoker. It's also clear that if somebody has some kind of chronic illness, we should perform medical underwriting. We may need a physician's opinion. Depends if we're talking about term or permanent life insurance, whole life insurance products, or annuities, or retirement planning, or long-term care planning. There are a lot of different applications to medical underwriting. But at the end of the day, if I take it back to the flying a plane example or navigation on the street, medical underwriting is all about understanding the current state of the individual from a health perspective, and maybe other attributes or social attributes like academic history, history and occupation that could impact substantially health insurance, for example, and different other social attributes like alcohol usage and level of exercise and so forth. All these things are very important for understanding the current state of health of an individual. And what we realized as a team, where part of us come with a tech background, where we didn't speak about that we're in Israel and Israeli founded and so forth. There's a lot of technology going on in Israel. So some have a tech background and others have capital markets background, is that the way medical underwriting is performed, and later on we realized the way preventative medicine and even regular care, and there's a transition going on in the broader health industry, not only in medical underwriting, is basically going through a revolution now, literally, no less than that, a transformation of being able to learn, not from just looking at this very individual case and kind of trying to assess within seconds, rather being able to look at this individual in a much more holistic manner and much broader perspective by utilizing different type of mechanisms of artificial intelligence. And we could drill obviously deeper into that.
Yeah, fascinating topic. By the way, you mentioned splitting insurance, male versus female. Our predecessor, our insurance company associated with NASA, I think Marion Lahr was like the first company in the U.S. to actually implement those tables. So, just interesting
Wow.
connection here on the life insurance side.
Cool.
So. Tell me what you can do for me. So normally I go get underwritten. Insurance company says, Paul, here's your rate. What do you tell me? I mean, do I give you blood work? Do I fill out some sort of form? What do I get back from your company?
Maybe I'll take one step back before I get into that exact example and explain, maybe just dumb down what artificial intelligence is and why it's been applied in many cases, but in the health industry, it's still relatively new. I mean, it's going on. We're definitely not the first, but how it's basically revolutionizing what's going on. So artificial intelligence, a day-to-day application, for example, is if we take our Google Photos app, and I don't know how many of you guys played around with it, but basically you could kind of search pictures with a dog in the picture or a bicycle, or pictures of myself with my spouse and children, and you could literally only get those pictures. Or if you want to find invoices from December 22, you just write invoice and you see all the invoices based on months. So that is artificial intelligence. And what it's all about, it's artificial intelligence, because intelligence, we as children saw a dog for the first time and our parents told us, oh, that's a dog, right, in a picture or in real time. And then if we saw a very similar dog, maybe it took a little bit more than once, but we realized that's a dog. But then if we saw a totally different type of dog, Maybe we didn't yet know that's also a dog. That could be a tiger or a cat, right? It could be anywhere around those type of animals. But then once we saw several tens or hundreds of dogs, we have intelligence and we realize, oh, all these are dogs. These are their characteristics. That's how their face is kind of formed. This is how they behave. That is a dog. Artificial intelligence is doing the same thing. It needs usually way more samples in order to learn that there's a dog there. However, with computing power and the power of internet and the number of pictures accessible, it could end up doing it way quicker and more efficiently at scale and actually search through thousands of pictures and find all the dogs in there. So it takes time to train it on what is a dog. You may have to show it 10,000 pictures of dogs, but at some point, we won't go into the technicalities of how you teach it and how you train it and showing it the pixels, but at some point, it will realize this is a dog and this is a cat and this is a tiger. These are different animals. That's artificial intelligence. So if you show it a large enough sample size, it will do amazing. So for us, for example, in the Air Force, going back to that analogy, in order for me to process information, any fighter pilot in the world to process information efficiently, and that's mandatory in order to succeed in the mission, what you have to do is you have to prepare a lot and simulate a lot of situations and have the situation you have to be as similar as possible to the situation you're in, and you've already solved it in some way that worked, and let's take that course of action. It'll never be the exact same situation, but it may be similar enough that if you could pull out that disk from your brain which matches it to that situation you've seen, you could perform well. So in data, that's basically what we're trying to do just with a machine. So if a medical doctor, for example, sees a patient, he has 10 minutes or 15 minutes, in a normal, some doctors do them in 5 minutes, right? They're really efficient practices, right? Offices. So they give the patient 10 or 15 minutes. In those 10 or 15 minutes, they prepared for years as physicians, but they don't have all of research on all impairments and all illnesses for this individual's exact situation. And they don't have the time and capacity. I mean, a good clinician will ask questions to understand the background, but he won't have the capacity to take into account all factors in a holistic manner. At the end of the day, he's going to have to kind of make his rules of thumb and his regular solutions to different situations, but it won't be tailored to that individual. So if we take this to medical underwriting, where that's LiST's current focus, is if, for example, the large reinsurance companies, they have these guides, we won't go into names, right? We're here with an insurance company. So, but they have these life guides and underwriting guides and so forth, and they have debit systems and credit systems. So if somebody's doing exercise that's better, that means he's healthier, he'll be on a better table or a more favorable table in terms of premiums. Whereas if he has a chronic illness, then he may be declined insurance if we're talking about an onset. And later on in reinsurance, that's it. He has his insurance, but it'll be priced differently when you transfer the risk to a reinsurance company or capital markets. But a chronic illness will usually be factored into a certain debit. I mean, there may be some nuance to it, but the guide the insurance company has no capability of taking every single individual and the medical underwriter with his human brain trying to factor in his social attributes, the amount of exercise he does, his BMI, his history of blood tests, the patterns of his blood tests, a lot of other factors you could take into account and create a personalized medical underwriting. And the result of that is they're very large, increments in medical underwriting. There's very few. You got a preferred, standard, or substandard tables, and your cohorts are packed with people who are at the top of the cohort or at the bottom of the cohort. And the people at the bottom are basically benefiting. The people at the top, they could have maybe been a preferred. With the right broker, they may have gotten a half the price premium, but they're actually funding the ones who are at the bottom of the cohort. That's not personalized. And we see a transformation not only in life insurance, it's in car insurance, again, due to AI. For example, Tesla offers, this is again the AI segment here, Tesla offers insurance for safe drivers. And it's not about testifying that you're a safe driver. It's not saying, oh, I drive safely, I have no tickets. It's about actually tracking your driving. So this raises questions of privacy and so forth, but it's tracking your driving, and they can actually give dynamic insurance. The more you drive, the more premium you pay, and the less safe you drive, the more premium you pay. But if you're a safe driver who only drives to work back and forth every day in a safely manner, you could drop your premium costs. So this idea in the health space, both in the general broader medicine, which we could give some examples to applications of that in a second, but in medical underwriting is basically we're going to see a shift where all of these asset classes of annuities and retirement planning and financial advisors will be able to give personalized advice, and long-term care and home care and insurance, primary insurance and health insurance, all these industries who are heavily dependent on medical underwriting. We're going to see a shift to personalized medical underwriting. We don't need to create a cohort. If we could do personalized underwriting, then everybody could be one humongous cohort, which every person will have a different premium. Think about that situation where every person will have a different premium that fits. It could even be dynamic, but that fits his exact characteristic. And if he stopped skiing on an annual basis, then it could be his premium will drop a little bit. And there are many other characteristics that you could take into account, which, of course, to train these models, you have to work with anonymized data and de-identified, and there's a lot of HIPAA compliance that comes into account. This may be a reason why this industry, with regard to data science, is lagging to other industries, which even in social media and so forth, data is super important, but when it comes to personal health information, it's a different level. And therefore, there are some obstacles. In a perfect world, all of the medical history in the world would be in one aggregated place, all de-identified, and you could create the best models in the world for preventative medicine, for diagnostics, for medical underwriting, and so forth. Does that make sense?
I'm drowning from that fire hose of information. That was I'm trying to figure out. And you've seen the movie Top Gun?
Sure. Which one? There are two of them.
The original.
Yeah.
Gotta go with the original. You'd be Goose.
Yep. Well, that's not a good comparison because his ending didn't turn out too great. But yeah, exactly.
No, I know. But that was your.
I'm here to tell the story, so I'm not Goose. But yeah.
On a more serious note, in the U.S. and I'm sure other places, you mentioned auto insurance. So a lot of auto insurance companies are now offering good driver discounts, and they're using either like AI or they're using some sort of device to track the driving. Which is, I know people working in that space, and it's going to continue to evolve. You mentioned health insurance very briefly. Where do you see this going in the health insurance space? And by extension, Medicare. Because I can give you a personal example. Like my health insurance is a ridiculous amount of premium every year, and I barely go to the doctor, and I'm healthy. I live a healthy lifestyle, and I'd love to sign up for a AI-driven medical plan.
Right.
Like when do you predict that will be reality?
So my AI predicts now. What I think I would say like this: it's already happening, and what we're seeing, it's more on the carrier level, so it's more B2B process as opposed to giving a necessarily personalized product directly right now to the consumer. Although that's coming, that's around the corner, in my opinion. But what we're seeing is, for example, if we talk about preventative medicine, that could be on the clinician level, the doctor, advising to go do a test. Or that could be in the carrier payer levels where they want to cut costs. So, but it's a business use case. But at the end of the day, it's going to hopefully cut the premiums for healthier people, and it'll create they'll lay the playing field in order to have more personalized products, which will take time until carriers are able to adjust personalized products until they get convinced that these models are more sufficient. That's why LiST as a business right now mostly operates in capital markets, reinsurance, and so forth, where they're bringing a whole new level of cash flow assessment and reviewing entire portfolios and so forth, and not yet within an insurance company where they're providing the actual product of medical underwriting yet. Hopefully in the coming years, that'll definitely change. But for example, carriers in health insurance are very interested in being able to identify within their current book of business, their portfolios, where they could save costs, for example, of admission or readmission or different other fees that may happen due to not being aware of something very small they could have potentially done to prevent. For example, if something's within the medical data or information occurs, or if there's a claim or if there's an admission to the hospital, which is super expensive for the carriers, then after that, if you could maintain a certain level of tracking of the patient, which is excellent for the patient because he does not want to go back to the hospital and overgo another set of treatments or surgery, right? So even for the patient, it could be excellent. But if you're able to identify which people we should revisit or send a nurse over or check their vitals more often and track, or even give them a device which will track, different patterns so we could prevent the next heart event or the next attack or whatever it may be, that is super beneficial. And that's the best business case, to have the carriers realize financially it's worth it for them to apply these preventative measures and send over that nurse on their expense in order to catch something early and prevent the next readmission, which may cost $50,000 to the carrier. So that's kind of where we're already seeing it today. There are a bunch of companies who are usually focused on specific categories within the health industry, if it's cardio or pulmonary or diabetes and so forth. But we're seeing it grow and grow. And the more data you have, the more you could identify in which cases you should do early intervention or preventative. I could give another very classic example we like to talk about is the whole industry of preventative medicine is again lagging a personalized element. If you go into the CDC and look up, we should add that as a link as an example. But if you look in the CDC recommendations for preventative, procedures or checkups to do per age for different diseases. For example, when you should do a colonoscopy to prevent colon cancer, the recommendation is at age 50. And a clinician or physicians know that if somebody's, has a family history or something like that, maybe they should advise them doing it sooner, but they may not notice or realize, or you may have moved cities and you're a new physician, he doesn't know that family history. And thanks to technology and the EMR system and the exchanges and the ability to retrieve medical records more conveniently and so forth, the data on an individual is becoming more and more accessible, even to the individual and to his primary doctor, right? But if you implement measures of artificial intelligence, two types. One is what we were talking about before this discussion, like the chat GPT type of technologies, like natural language processing or retrieving of information or summarization. That's one type of technology. And the second one is predictive. That's the one I was talking about more before, predictive artificial intelligence. And you are able to predict what this individual's risk is to that thing. Then every physician, instead of saying that at age 60 or 55 or 60, I don't remember the number, you should screen for lung cancer if you have 30 pack years of smoking history, for example, or at what age you should be doing breast cancer screening, or what age you should be doing colonoscopies, instead of giving advice for the entire population of America of what age you should be doing it, a doctor should have a dashboard in front of him based on the medical history of this individual, where you walk into to his office and he says, okay, you at age 29 need to do a colonoscopy, and you at age and so forth. Basically, there are like 30 or 40 lines of preventative. There should be way more things that we should be preventing, and it should be personalized. Every single individual has a different story. And to keep it at that level of age 50 as a cutoff is basically saying the majority of people develop colon cancer after age 50. So it's a good time to do it. But that costs a lot because a lot of people, the likelihood of them having colon cancer is way lower. They maybe could wait till age 70, and others who fall between the cracks should be doing it from age 20. So don't catch me on the exact numbers, but I'm saying the idea of getting a holistic picture and basing it on millions of data points and data examples and ground truth from those examples and being able to give very precise, personalized recommendations is definitely what we're very excited about. And we're applying it right now for assessing the likelihood of life-changing events. So we could help health insurance or life insurance or retirement business better assess their book of business or produce new business. But there are many, many applications to the same exact process and review of medical data.
So as you're going through the examples, and if you mentioned a few, what kind of resistance have you met we have multiple discussions, and some people want to welcome in the data with open arms, and AI is exciting to them. And other people are a little bit more apprehensive about bringing this in, whether it's their practice or into their personal lives. What have you seen, and how have those conversations been going?
It's an excellent question, and I think it's super crucial. And I think in a way, it's like almost like a catch-22. On the one hand, privacy is everything, and specifically, personal health information is everything. So sometimes when we describe our capability, and again, I have no idea any names of our data sets. We have data from partners, and we never see the names. So we have no idea the names, social security. We like to have zip codes, but it never goes down to too high of a resolution. It's a 5-digit zip code because geographics do have an influence. From the data modeling perspective, it would be better to have more accurate data than that. But that's always a tricky thing because on the one hand, we will all gain a ton if we have as much data possible. We train our data sets and prediction models based on as much data as possible, but people don't want to have their data exposed out there. So I think what's good, and it takes explaining to do, is that there are a lot of platforms and abilities to encrypt the information that even when we are building models, we don't have access to a lot of the raw data. We don't even need it. In order to build a methodology, we need a higher level of access. But once that works, we could scale up our models without even knowing exactly what's going on in there. And it's kind of almost like by you giving your data, if you know it's secured, and it's very hard to trust, especially because of what social networks have done to our trust in these kind of networks. But obviously regulation is much more tight in personal health information in the US with HIPAA, as opposed to social networks, which is totally behind in that. But if you knew that your data is secure, but you're contributing to a model which will ultimately help you and everybody else, then in a perfect world, everybody would put their data into an encrypted platform, and then you'd let the data scientists, us, where we have physicians, medical doctors, data scientists, medical underwriters, and actuaries on our team, do their work. And then the result would be everybody would be living longer, literally living longer lifespan and longer health span, because we'd all be on top of. You'd be able to understand that you should be putting in more salt or less salt in your food, and more sugar or less sugar. And if you knew the impact and how crucial that is, it would be much easier for the physician to give you that advice. But your doctor, when you go to him because you have a throat ache or a headache, he can't get into that. He doesn't have the dashboard. He doesn't have those 2 or 3 weeks of preparation in order to prepare for your very specific case. I had that privilege when we were flying to prepare for a specific mission for weeks. A doctor sees you, and then he has to see somebody else, and he's seeing 40 to 60 patients a day. So he can't get into that level of detail. But due to the data, he could. So I think as long as you could trust your doctor to be able to see your history of medical records, which he could relatively today in many areas of the US retrieve pretty easily, but you have to give him the consent, of course. So if he could get access to your medical data, and people like us, like LiST and others, could produce very interesting insight and advice or suggestions to the doctor in real time, and he'll trust those suggestions because he's gained mileage with that. This is a process. This won't happen overnight, but I think in the next 10 years it will happen. Then you will end up benefiting a ton. So it'll be like, if you give me your medical data right now, we'll give you an amazing personalized suggestions, and based on that, you could plan your course of action, and you could go to your financial advisor with some of these insights and plan your health insurance you should be getting, and your life insurance, and what you need and what you don't need, and so forth. And these are all products that are going to, they're going to be rolling out as we speak. I mean, in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot coming out. They still need a lot of work on their precision, so people don't fully trust it, but we're heading that way. I think we're in very exciting times in terms of artificial intelligence in general, kind of reshaping the world. We spoke about this before we kind of started this conversation. But in the life science arena, I think it's going to be really very dramatic on all of our quality of life.
So Yaacov, you talked a lot about the health impact and tell us a little bit about products and services for seniors, but also retirement in the, today and in the future, how that will all be impacted.
I would say seniors are perceived as a group who technology is above them. They missed the technology opportunity type of thing, almost, right? That's a huge misconception. They don't need to be on TikTok or social media to enjoy technology, but they need to be bold or have the guts or brave to wanna benefit from technology. That's what I would say. If I want to, give my message to what a senior should be doing, is I think it's not only about the different products that we experience as a younger generation. I think it's basically them. They need to be kind of open to benefiting from these types of products. And there are a lot of products out there. I won't necessarily start name dropping a lot of us Israeli technologies, and not only, but for example, for making a better experience within their home, whether it's companions or different wearables who could detect. And those could be connected, again, with compliance and so forth, to systems who could then alarm or send over help or realize differences in patterns, whether it could even be indicators of depression and so forth. There are a lot of platforms that could help you, check your vitals on a daily basis with camera or with different devices and so forth. And these type of things today already could change your life. I mean, what you have to do is you have to go to your doctor and say, wait, all this artificial intelligence, where could I benefit from that? You have to explore and look for those solutions. And there are already a lot of solutions out there. A lot of the solutions are going to come from behind the scenes. For example, what I was replying to Joseph's question before is by the carriers wanting to implement. A lot of businesses like us want to sell at scale, so it'll go to mass quicker, and basically tell them, look, we've built these models that could predict the likelihood of a life-changing event. You want to save on your costs, and you want your balance sheet to look better, right? So if you send out, let me review your book of business, and you could reach out to these 500 people out of 10,000 people and kind of prevent that next readmission. So they're already benefiting in that way. And when I say already, I mean in the last few years, and it's going to just increase on a daily basis. Many insurance companies are far from implementing that, right? There are different sizes of insurance companies. Some are more tech savvy and less, and so forth. But I think a senior today should already have access. Now, he doesn't have to be an expert at Gmail or social media in order to ask his physician or his children or his financial advisor and say, look, let's map out what I have and try to help me figure out the best tools I could utilize. And it could be financial tools. It could be assets they have that they may not fully be aware of. For example, we have a client that helps utilizes whether it's home equity or insurance products, assets they own, in order to turn that into cash to live better. And also there, understanding their needs and what the likelihood of them having a life-changing medical event where they should either meet substantial expenses or even what their life expectancy is. All these things are super crucial. They're not always, comfortable. It may not be so pleasant to have these type of conversations, but a financial advisor helping a senior, an 85-year-old, plan his latest stages of life, which hopefully with medications will keep extending. But that's a different session, and you had a specific podcast on that, a previous show, which is super interesting and going to happen again due to data science. But seniors could definitely benefit both financially with different financial products and opportunities, with current assets they have, with financial planning, with buying or getting possession of different types of products, which will make their home more safe and more trackable. Like it may go into their privacy to have a camera or to have a device, but that could also save their lives. So that's kind of to Laura's question. It's tricky. And at the end of the day, it's a transition, and people are going to have to trust these devices, and the manufacturers of these devices have to be trustworthy. They have to prove that they work in an anonymized way, and the data does not transform. They're not selling the data in any way. They're only improving their internal models for that in order to better serve the reason that person, that individual, that senior purchased this product and so forth. But there are a lot of things out there, but if you don't try to get to them, then they won't just necessarily land on you. It's very hard to market to seniors. They're not online as much. It's very hard to reach them. So you could try to market to their children or financial advisors. But if the senior listening to this show right now goes to his doctor and says, look, and to his financial advisor and say, I heard a podcast and I know there are a lot of tools out there for financial planning and I could utilize my current assets give me some ideas. And they just ask the questions. I think they'll start being able to figure that out. Or if they listen to all of your shows, they'll also find a lot of very interesting applications of information.
Yeah, well, this is fascinating. Now we're sort of near the top of our hour here. If people are listening, they're saying, "Well, Yaacov, this is great. Why aren't insurance companies doing it?" The short answer is complicated. Speaking on from my own experience, you've got a lot of layers of parties in there. We've talked about the reinsurers that have to be on board. The insurance companies have to have a certain, if they're going to do it themselves, have to have a certain scale history. I think we've already talked about it. Laura did kind of went that direction. Is the regulators have to be there as well, because part of the concept of insurance, fundamental precept, is you are aggregating risks, and you can only, if we only underwrite Joseph, is that really insurance? So we get to some esoteric questions we could spend another hour on here, Yaacov. So it's great stuff. I think it clearly is the future. Question is, how long will it take to get to insurance and pricing products? I think it'll come a lot sooner to helping people guide everyday living decisions. But Joseph, so what's your perspective? Last question, perspective on what Yaakov's taking us through. Would you like to share?
Sure. So there's a lot of interesting information that was shared today. There are companies I know already using DNA as an example to create products or to help people live a healthier life. But what Yaacov seems to be building here is using lots of data inputs, and he described a number of potential applications. I'm pretty excited to see what companies come out of using this data, safely, obviously, and ethically. But I think we're going to see a revolution, if you will, of data and personalized medicine in the not too distant future. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking forward to the day where we have on our government issued IDs, at least here in the US, where we can check a box and say we're an organ donor. I'm waiting for the day where I can check that box and say I'm all in on AI, right? So yes, across the platforms, yes for health, yes for insurance, yes, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden, Laura's data can go into, whether it's blockchain or another form.
Love that.
It's out into the universe.
Great idea.
Yeah.
And I can just opt in once. So I'm waiting for that day. And I don't think it'll take too long or it'll take forever. But it's going to be one of them.
Did you, Laura, did you ever see the series Manifest? Did you ever watch that show?
No, not yet anyway.
Oh, this is an interesting one. So not to digress, but there are these death dates everybody has, right? They kind of know when. So maybe on the card it's predicted death.
Could you imagine?
Can you imagine that?
Well, I think we could do a full other episode about living and thriving, right? Because we don't know our death date, knock on wood. So how do you thrive in the moment, right? It could be a completely other show on that.
Of course.
Right. Exactly.
Living healthy it's all about living healthy.
That's right.
Yeah. Mary, you've got something better than what I just
absolutely not, Paul. I think I would just say, educating seniors so they're not intimidated by AI and all the big data that we were talking about, in a way that can empower them. So when they do have discussions with I'm going to go with the health thing, when they do have discussions with their primary care physician, they feel comfortable, they feel like they know, and they're not afraid, because I feel like with seniors, they're afraid of information getting into the wrong hands or not being used properly. So I would like, how can we educate perhaps and, make this topic not as scary and in, bite-sized chunks, if you will.
Yeah. I love that, Mary. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think you guys are taking a substantial part in that, meaning this type of show or conversation is definitely a first step. It's definitely a real challenge, is the adoption, both for the carriers, but also for the seniors, 100%.
Right. Well, I'd like as a death date as far out in the future as possible, Yaacov. So
you got it.
So
I
would be curious.
I give you 250.
Okay, good. I'll take it. So you got this machine whirring. You said it takes 10,000 images for the computer to know there's a dog. Hey, I just saw a picture of Paul. He's healthy. He's going to live long. Now, there are probably some attributes that are not surprising. He exercised. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink a lot. What are some of the attributes that surprised you? I mean, just as in conclusion of the show.
I could give an example. It may be esoteric, but tea drinking. Okay, we see it as healthy. So we found an example within our research, and we actually found a real life example. We were able to narrow it down. The beauty of AI is both training on data, but also no physician could know all the research out there, right? So everybody knows when they have something on themselves, if they start searching the web, they may find some random PhD or article describing a similar situation, right? If you search enough, where your primary caretaker can never do that. Even though he's an amazing doctor, he studied at Harvard, he knows his stuff. So we had an example where tea drinking impacts iron. And iron could have many other, it could be an indicator for many, many other situations. But changing that habit of tea drinking could have solved it. Now, we all think in a good way, meaning you have to stop drinking tea, and the individual solved his, or that group solved their iron situation. That was a random one we did not expect. But in general, it's not only about knowing which attributes have an impact, for example, exercising. It's being able to quantify in every single case. So if a carrier, for example, takes a chronic illness and debits it with 100 points, let's say 100% higher premium, for all people with that specific illness in a certain level, when we run 5,000 people in our system with the same exact situation, same illness, some will have a 20-point debit and some will have a 200-point debit. And actually, no single person will have the exact same debiting, because every single person has a whole story, has a whole picture, has a whole, all the different characteristics. There are hundreds of key parameters, key, factors that come into account. So in no single underwriting is going to be the exact same weights or contribution to the different factors, which we all know impact longevity or health. So it's not only about understanding a new pattern, that's also something AI could do, but it's also understanding the weight or the impact of that specific category or attribute to this individual situation.
Fascinating. So, Yaacov, how do people find out more about you, more about your company, more about flying and navigating an F-16?
Right. So you could, happy to provide a link and website and an email and LinkedIn, and just feel free to reach out. Anybody interested in research and life science and figuring out what they have at hand or how to predict better with regard to medical condition, we're we're a good place to reach out to and have an interesting conversation. Hopefully an interesting conversation at the least, and maybe even a partnership at the most.
Great show. Joseph, Mary, thanks for joining us today. Laura, it was a pleasure as usual. And for all our listeners, join us again next week for another episode of the Reimagine podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.